Hello everyone and welcome to another game from the 37th European Club Cup. This is a game from round 2 and it is world champion Magnus Carlsen on his quest to that 2900 rating against the German Grandmaster Alexander Naumann. I will have to try very hard not to pronounce it Niemann, as that's what everyone is talking about these days, but I will do my best. And yes, I'm still working on the Steinitz saga. I'm very close to finishing it to the point where I will feel comfortable of starting another saga, like I mentioned in the previous video. I will start probably next week, maybe even this week, but so far things are looking great. There's some incredible data that I have recovered, from various books and weird sources, so I think you guys will enjoy it. Now let's get to the game. It's a really nice one, played in the style of old masters, so let's dive straight into it. Magnus with the white pieces opens with e4. We have e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and now d4. Magnus goes for the Scotch game, something we haven't seen in quite a while, especially by the world champion. E captures on d4, knight captures, and now two of the lines are, particularly enjoyable here for black. That is the classical line with bishop to c5. This is the most analyzed line, the one, where just bring the bishop to c5, you put the queen on f6, you go for checkmate, this is something you teach everyone. You go to a chess club, this is what they will teach you. But here we have knight to f6. It's a different one, it's the Schmidt variation, and it's also a very forcing line that you have to, of course, know if you play it, as those two are fairly of the same popularity. The bishop to c5 line a bit more popular. So knight captures on c6, b captures on c6, and now pawn to e5, eliminating the knight here, so you can advance the pawn. Queen to e7, now the pawn cannot move as the king is on e1, and queen to e2. So again, nothing new here, all been played before. Knight to d5, and here there are two, again, very popular choices that that white can play. That is to further harass the knight with c4, or to play h4, prepare bishop to g5, and so on. But here Magnus plays knight to d2, and he shows that he prepared something very special for this game. So, okay, what can black do? Well, there are many moves you can try here. There are very few games that have reached this position, so it is very, very unexplored territory. He goes for knight to f4, attacks Carlsen's queen here. Magnus plays a queen to e3, not to e4, which is interesting. e4 is the more active square. And now there are some games where knight to e6 were played and knight to g6 were played. But here, Naumann just repeats knight to d5, and he attacks the white queen once again. And it is now, as of move 9, that we have a completely new game, sort of checking if Magnus will go for a repetition of moves. That is very unlikely that he would settle for a draw here. He has over 300 rating points higher rated, but you play it to see if the black queen has a better square. So queen to e4, and now, okay, there's a different plan. Pawn to f6. Now if pawn captures, now the knight can recapture on f6, so Magnus chases away the knight. c4, and this is a very, very ambitious try, and black will get a lot of play here. Knight to b4 now. And it's very hard to find the move for Magnus because, what do you play here? If you try to chase away the knight, which seems like a logical thing to do, you do not want this knight staring at the c2 square. There's d5. And now one of the ideas of bringing the queen to e4 was that d5 can be played with tempo. And now if c captures, look at this. The white queen cannot remain on this diagonal unless it goes all the way back to b1. And if bishop to b1, now queen captures on e5 with check, followed by bishop to f5, and that's pretty much it. So what did Magnus have in mind allowing knight to b4? Well, Magnus had in mind king to d1. Playing real chess in the style of old masters, not scared to use the king as a weapon already as of move 12, which is, very nice as there are so many pieces on the board. So here, queen captures on e5. Interesting choice. You could also play f captures on e5 and keep the queens on the board, which would suit some of the players as the white king cannot castle, but Alexander goes for the queen trade very early on. Magnus plays a3, and now queen captures on e4. Knight captures, knight back to a6, and now Magnus, of course, plays pawn to b4, a move vital to any chess position, but here it serves as means of keeping the knight at bay, so the knight cannot re-enter the game. If you want to bring it back into the game, it's going to have to go to b8, then probably to d7 at some point or something. So Alexander tries to activate it right away. He plays c5, e5, and now, okay, Magnus just plays b5, says that knight is not coming into the game anytime soon. Bishop to b7 first, attacking the undefended knight here, and now just bishop to d3. Knight does go to b8, and now Magnus plays rook to e1, threatening all sorts of nasty discoveries. King to f7, and now knight back to c3. Offering yet another pawn, but it would be a bit dangerous to capture this pawn. If you capture it right away, then bishop to f4 is very nasty, just going after the c7 pawn, and the only good way to defend it is to play something like d6, but then you get bishop to f5, then bishop to e6 check comes, and it's very, very hard to play this with black. With Magnus having the bishop pair control of the e file, the knight being able to jump to d5 looks very scary. So okay, bishop to d6 first, you will grab the pawn at some point, but you've developed your bishop and you prevented Magnus from playing bishop to f4. So Magnus plays f4, now offering another pawn, and okay, bishop captures on g2. Grabbing the pawn is the best move. Magnus plays king to c2, and now pawn to g6. So you can develop the rook. The h7 pawn will not be hanging, and here Magnus plays a staggering bishop to b2, and now Magnus is giving up another pawn. So he already gave up 2 pawns, and now he's giving up a 3rd pawn. Now the old masters sort of had a saying: it's okay to accept 1 pawn. It's except the 2nd pawn, maybe, okay, that's very bold, but accepting the 3rd pawn, you have to be incredibly sure to accept the 3rd pawn. And here it would be better to, for example, play something like f5, and now, okay, the pawn is still hanging, but your position has improved. And if knight to d5, opening an attack on the rook, you can play rook e8, offer a rook trade, and let's say if the rooks get traded off, now you give back 1 pawn, let's say knight f6 check, Magnus picks up the h7 pawn, and the game continues. But this seems like it's sort of maybe Alexander had the idea that maybe he was having something against Magnus, and he just didn't want to let him off the ropes, and he played bishop captures on f4. And now he grabbed the 3rd pawn, which means that if Magnus does not have something spectacular, then black is just winning. I mean, you can't play being down 3 pawns. But what did Magnus have in mind here? He plays rook to e2. Attacks the bishop here, and now, okay, the bishop has to move first. You can't play bishop f3 because then rook f2 and one of the bishops will hang, so the bishop has to go back. Bishop back to b7, and now Magnus plays rook to f1. So okay, he's down 3 pawns, but he has 2 monster bishops here. He has a knight ready to jump to d5. He has full control of the e file, and for the moment, very, very nice control of the f file. And how do you play this? g5 is played, defending the bishop. This is it doesn't look great, but it is the strongest move recommended by the engine, and Magnus just attacks the g5 pawn to h4, and now again it's a hard position for black. You could try defending with h6, but in the game d6 was played, and again it seems like now you're going to play knight to d7. The knight comes into the game, and you are very, very happy with your position. But now Magnus just plays h captures on g5, and now the problem is you cannot capture back. If you play, let's say, bishop captures on g1, now rook f to e1, and you are getting destroyed here. Point is that because c5 was played and this pawn to b5 move was allowed, the knight can never get active. Can't go to a6, can't go to c6, can't go to d7 because now rook e7 check picks up the knight. So black is basically playing without a rook and knight, and this rook still has to somehow get activated. Another thing, after h captures on g5, you might consider f captures on g5, but then look at this, bishop e4. Attacks the bishop. The bishop cannot move because the rook hangs, so you have to trade. Bishop captures with check, knight captures, and again, what do you play? The rook is hanging, the g5 pawn is hanging because the bishop is pinned. One thing you could consider is something like rook to g8 to keep everything in check, but just knight captures on g5 check. Rook captures, now rook captures on f4 check, and look at this, the 2 rooks and the bishop just doing a spectacular job here. What can you play? If king to g6, rook to f6 check, king to h5, rook to h2 check, and the king hunt continues. King g4, rook captures on h7, again not allowing the knight to be activated. This is just an incredibly sad position for black. There's just nothing you can play. You can never activate this this knight and rook. So instead, after h captures on g5, Alexander tried bishop to e5. At least he will stop the bishop on this diagonal. But now Magnus just played knight to e4. Also possible, and perhaps a bit more precise, is knight to d5, simply because, again, it prevents the knight from ever being activated. Point is that after bishop captures and king captures, you can, again, never activate the the knight, because now rook to e7 check would win the knight, as the knight controls the e7 square. After knight to e4, it is possible to activate the knight, but Magnus figured that it doesn't really matter. So here knight to d7 was played right away. If you go for bishop captures here, like in the previous line, then king captures, and after knight to d7, you can just play knight captures on f6, and again, white is just breaking through. So this might even be the best attempt for black, but it's still not all that much. So knight to d7 was played, and now Magnus just goes for knight captures on f6 with check, knight captures on f6, and now the incredible bishop captures on e5. It's very important to play this first, because then all of the threats remain. D captures on e5, rook captures on e5, and it was in this position on move 30 that Alexander Naumann resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So the knight will fall next, and even though, okay, you might be equally material for the moment, that's not going to last for long. Let's say you play rook h to e8, you don't even have to rush it with rook captures. Here you can even play rook captures on c5, just grab a pawn, now threaten this pawn so you can win the bishop. Not all that much to play. If rook 8 to c8, you then capture the knight with rook captures on f6 check, king g7, and now even bishop to f5, attacking the rook here. And now if the rook moves, you're going to win the c7 pawn with check. So maybe bishop e4 check, force a trade here, but again, it doesn't help. White can just go after the a7 pawn, and now you cannot defend here. Rook e7, rook captures on a7. You have to keep both of the rooks here to guard the c7 pawn, but then b6 is a threat. I mean, just a4, a5, a6, b5. I mean, you just push the pawns, and it's just game over. So yeah, beautifully done by Magnus. Alexander also played incredibly well, but at that moment where Magnus decided to offer the f4 pawn as well, sometimes you can accept one pawn, you can accept two pawns, but it's very, very rare that you can actually accept three pawns. Or maybe you can if your opponent is just blundering pawns, but chances are Magnus is not. So yeah, very nicely done, and I very much enjoyed this as I am preparing for the Steinitz saga. So you know, a game like this, you know, just giving up pawns for rapid development is very, very much appreciated from the world champion in 2022. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Do play the Scotch. You know, it offers many wonderful adventures to whoever tries it. I would like to wish a very happy birthday to Peter, and I would like to thank Tosuli, I love you, Alan Bradbury, Asdi Grant, and Storm70 on Bandcamp for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world while I'm preparing the Steinitz saga. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.